are you going to be able to wake up every day and not know where you're going to go and have to have conversations with people you don't know because you're used to the opposite of that? When I made that switch and I started bringing that energy, that tone of voice, eye contact, the presence, you feel it. And people feel it too on the other end of the conversation, the room, or if it's just one-on-one. Even if you have the best way to handle an objection, if you're not bringing that energy factor, these people aren't going to want to work with you. The path that I was on was not sustainable. It was not filling my cup. In the nursing field, we all know what we signed up for. I wasn't prepared to give anymore in that capacity. I was running low. I felt that slipping. Even going through, my divorce, that was a season. It has a start and an end, and there's a phase in and a phase out. And that's okay.
Critical care nurse of 10 years, single father, new to medical device sales member who just broke in well over 6 figures. John Kula, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you on today because I know so many people are going to be able to relate to your story. And I know you're going to be able to drop a lot of gems for all of our nurses and people who want to get better. And so let's start with, who is John?
So I'm John Kula. I've been a critical care nurse for 10 and a half years, and I'm a single father and a man of faith. And that's basically who I am in a nutshell. And kind of, dove into investing the time and energy to find another path for me because what I was doing wasn't going to work out long term. And so here I am with you after everything that we've gone through. So
yeah, well, it's first off, nothing makes me happier than sitting here in Miami, where you're from, and seeing you on the other side. It makes me so happy because I know you've gone through a very challenging year, and to see you completely change your life and also change your mindset to become the person you are today is what I can't wait for everyone else to see. And so before we dive into all of that, let's talk about you becoming a nurse and your journey of wanting to be a nurse.
Yeah. So like I said, I was a nurse for 10 and a half years. I actually moved to Miami back in 2014 to become a nurse for a nursing school. My parents had moved here at the time, so that's kind of why I left Texas and came here. Fast forward, went through nursing school, did an accelerated program because originally I wanted to be a physical therapist. Ultimately didn't want to pursue that route, pivoted to nursing school, ended up in an accelerated program because I already had a bachelor's degree. So kind of in and out of nursing school in about 4 semesters and got into the ICU right away. It's funny because they always tell you in nursing school that you can't get into critical care. You got to do med surge, step down. They name everything else, but that's what I wanted, and that's what I got. And I'll never forget, I used to write handwritten letters on a simple little resume and slid it under the director's door. And eventually, when I had the courage to call her, she answered, and she knew who I was just because of that. And so that's how I broke into critical care right out the gate.
I love it. Well, that just first off shows you the person you are, of the go-getter, not also letting everybody tell you what you can or can't do. You continue to push the envelope. But let's talk about what drew you to nursing.
So my mother was a nurse. She was a surgical tech and then became a nurse, and then she became a PA. And my father, he's a physician. He's an anesthesiologist. And so I come from a family of, with the healthcare background.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of what I was surrounded with growing up, being in the offices, just being around that. And so I knew that I always wanted to be in the healthcare industry, just didn't really know what. And I was an athlete in high school, so I had some sports injuries, ended up in a lot of physical therapy offices. So that's kind of what drew me to physical therapy originally. And then I was actually living in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a summer doing an internship. And I ran into a nurse in this cardiac and pulmonary rehab center. And she kind of took me under her wing for a couple days, and she was the one who kind of planted that seed that was an option. And talked to my parents about it and kind of sat on that for a little bit because it wasn't on my radar. I didn't really know much about it, but I really loved that you're going to be able to help people. You're going to be able to work 3 days a week, 3 12s. That gave me 4 days off. That's double the amount of time off that most people have. So there's extra opportunities there. Whether it's you want to be a present father or, a present husband, a present family member, a friend, like there's just so many more hours in a week and days in your week that you now capture with that profession. And so, day shift, night shift, there's so many like dynamics to it that were very attractive to me as a young man. So that's ultimately why I chose nursing.
You were able to go make that impact, and you did the 312s, and you were able to go live the nurse life. What made you start thinking about medical device sales?
Believe it or not, it wasn't on my radar. I knew that nursing wasn't the long-term play. I mean, even 1 year, 2 years in, you're looking around the unit and you're saying, you're looking at the older nurses and you're like, dang, man, they look like they've gone through it.
Tired.
They're limping, they're tired. It's like, I can't be that. Whatever comes of this, I can't pursue this forever. And so I always had that in mind. Originally, I was thinking anesthesia. I even pursued that, applied to some programs, and then COVID happened. That kind of shook things up. And then ultimately, with COVID, as sad as it is, it was a tough time for everyone. But it did ultimately become very lucrative for a lot of nurses in terms of traveling opportunities. And that kind of changed my trajectory. And ultimately, I sat down and kind of pursued alternative options, and with all that extra capital that I accumulated, I invested in real estate with my ex-wife, and then pivoted into entrepreneurship. I operated a mobile IV company for almost 3 years here in Fort Lauderdale. When my son was born, then again, that cost benefit analysis was there, and I was like, I can't do this and be the father that I want to be. So I fell back on nursing at that time. But a friend of mine, fast forward to make a long story short, a friend of mine calls me one day. He's like, dude, you're not going to believe this. I just broke into medical device sales, and you've just got to look into it. That's kind of what he said. He just planted the seed. That's the origin.
Yeah.
Fast forward, your algorithm starts changing. Your phone hears your conversations, or you start looking up things online, and so you start getting your funnel changes to what you're seeing. And I came across your page and got on your website. And what really took me over the line where I was like, no, this is it, was your testimonials. I mean, it's like, I don't know how many testimonials total, but it's
hundreds.
Yeah, it's the pure volume of it stood out to me as like, that's different. Like, I can't ignore that. And so that's why I ultimately booked a call with you, and here we are.
Here we are. You're making well over 6 figures in medical device sales. No, I love that. I always think it's very interesting, because the thing you just told me was what I hear the most from our nurses is, number one, they always tell me they saw a retirement party of like 30 or 40 years. And every single nurse that we ever talk to always says, that can't be me. It's interesting, right? Because my mom, just so we're clear, just celebrated 30 years at her hospital, and she's a diabetes educator, and she started as a nurse, right? And it's very interesting. My mom is the sweetest woman in the world, but she loved just working at the hospital, right? She loved it. It fit her world. But she also had 3 kids, and she was a single mom. So she wasn't trying to go to the next level in certain areas, right? Yeah, a lot of times she was just trying to survive. And so I say that because we get this all the time as nurses want to help people, but then we hear the burnout of, well, I'm an hourly employee. I don't get treated very well. I'm doing 1-to-1 a lot of times. I'd love to do 1-to-many and have a bigger impact. But also, we all can work the same shift, but one works 10 times harder than the other person, but we're both going to get paid about the same. And then, even though you guys are doing 312s, if you want to make more, you have to take more shifts, which then your time gets eaten up. And so this is the consistent thing we hear from nurses. And that's why when we get to show them you, and we were just talking about this off air, where you're now working less and you're making more. And the opportunity is you literally started at 6 figures, and that's the least amount of money you're ever going to make, because in your career, you're only going to grow. I just hope nurses always get to hear that. And like you said, usually it just comes from, hey, what is this? And the one thing I do just want to touch base is why we put so many testimonials out there is because exactly what you said. I've been in programs. I've been on the exact same side, or on your side, wanting to get into things, but I'm like, is this real? And we understand the landscape of the world. But I always make the joke, when's the last time you bought something, liked it so much, took a video, sent that person, told them how much you liked it, let them put your first and last name on it and all the videos. And then they're going to go and see your face on it. And then my favorite is, and then they'll say, well, let me call them and see if they say anything different. Right. And it's like, I share that because we just try to put so much proof out there, because with you taking the next step, we're now sitting here in Miami.
Yeah.
And you've changed your whole entire life.
Literally. Just like that.
In so many ways. But let's talk about this real quick. When you went to make that change, doing this safe nursing, again, you had already done a little bit of entrepreneurship, but now you're like, hey, I'm going to go into medical device sales, right? Was it scary to make the jump?
Good question. Me personally, I just kind of wrapped up a really tough season of my life. And so I was almost seeking out some clarity on what to do next. And so for me personally, it wasn't scary to make this jump. I've made, I feel like I've made harder decisions in my life personally. And for me, like I said, I was going through a really difficult season in my life. And so for me, I was like, let me be more intentional with my next steps, because what I'm doing right now is not working.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I was seeking that jump, that leap.
Yeah.
That investment, that something to lean on and guide me through that time.
Yeah. And I guess one thing I asked you that is because you had a friend break into medical device sales. What made you actually get on a call with us and want to join us instead of just calling a couple more reps and seeing if you can just do it on your own, like all the other nurses, where you just apply? Yeah.
So hearing the enthusiasm in his voice, one was, like I said, that's the origin story of like what made me start looking into this as a career option. The second point was my friend, when he told me that he had broken in, I asked, one of my first questions was, well, how did you find out about that? It was a friend of his. And I was like, well, how long did it take you? And he told me, well, it took me almost 2 years to get in. And I was like, dang, if that's what it takes, like I'm willing to do it if this is actually like what I decide to do. But I'm not someone who's afraid of fast tracking a process, right? And if it makes sense and it aligns with my goals. And so ultimately I was seeking out mentorship. And when I came across your page and your feed, the blogs, the testimonials, I was like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. A way to intentionally move forward and kind of fast track this process, and honestly get out of the other end of it more prepared than I would have been if I just kind of did this on my own.
Yeah. And I guess one quick question I have is, now that you've done the program, you're placed and you're in the field, do you feel like this set you up to go have success inside of the industry as a nurse with no background inside of medical device sales?
100%. I mean, throughout the program, one of the mottos is do the job to get the job. And it's also, when you're joining the course or the program, it's everybody, both parties has skin in the game. And so knowing that, you're going to navigate through it differently through that time period, and everything's very intentional, and you develop this blueprint that's ultimately foolproof, but it's only if you put the work in.
Yeah. And I just asked that because, again, many people get afraid because they're like, I'm a nurse, I don't know what to do. Right.
Yeah.
But our biggest thing is, like you say, we teach you how to do the job to get the job, and everyone will see that. But we actually are telling you, like, for example, if we're having you reach out to a hiring manager, we talk about, hey, once you're actually in the industry, this is the surgeon, and this is how we would actually make it play, right? And so I share that for anybody listening to go into it. But let's go back into, all right, you're a nurse. You're also a single father.
Yes.
Tell me about the transition of, hey, I'm a nurse, and I'm trying to make this transition as a nurse into medical device sales, which is a hard industry to get into by itself, but as a single father.
Well, it definitely changes the calculus, right? So as a single dad sharing custody of my son, it's not, the program wasn't as straightforward for me, because my timeline was just naturally different. I'm working full time, sometimes overtime, and I have a house to put up, a roof to put over our head. having to move and having to, put food in our bellies and like, just like life stuff, that kind of that pressure that you have in life. And being a single dad, the program, it did take me longer to get through the modules and networking. But really what it comes down to is if you do have additional pressures in your life, or if you're struggling to find time, it's not that you don't have it. It's just a matter of being more intentional. So, and that's where the coaches come into play for me. I really leaned on the coaching and that mentorship because, it's like a whirlwind. You're like super excited once you first start and you're going through everything and you're starting the networking process and that journey. And then you're inevitably going to run into like headwinds, right? So it's really just a matter of being realistic with your own expectations, and then also leaning on the coaching. That's what y'all are there for at the end of the day. But when a lot of people just don't want to bother you, or you don't want to come off like you're not capable. And so it's really just having honest conversations with yourself and leaning on your mentors, leaning on your family, and really blocking off the time. For example, networking for me, I wasn't going to be able to shoot off 100 messages in a day, because then now messages are coming back and now I can't make all these calls. And It's like you overdid it. You overshot. And now instead of underselling and over delivering, you oversold and now you're under delivering. And that's a big problem, especially in this industry.
Yep.
And so I really leaned on the coaching and I really sought feedback. And if you're open to feedback, if you're seeking feedback and you're open to that, then you're going to find your way, because you're not going to just figure it out.
Yeah.
You're going to waste time.
Yeah. And that's what people really miss. And we talk about this all the time, is it's either time or investing in yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Because you'll figure it out. But like, you could have been doing this for 2 years. And
yeah, I didn't want that.
Yeah. And probably wouldn't be where you're at even today after 2 years.
No.
Right. And so let's actually talk about this now for my nurses watching, right? They're going to be like, okay, John, that's great. But what about me being a nurse actually makes me a good candidate? Because many people get told, no, you need to go get B2B sales experience. You have to have sales experience, compared to, we love nurses. We know you all make great candidates for medical device sales, because there's a thing called the clinical specialist. And there's also, we've had nurses go in as associate sales reps, full line sales reps, or clinical specialists. So what about nursing gives you such a great background to be a competitive candidate?
Okay. That's a really good question. What comes to mind is, at least in the critical care space, that's my background, so I can only speak to that. Personally, every day that you're showing up for work, you never know what you're really going to get, right? It could be a good day, it could be a bad day. Medical device is very similar. You really don't know how your day's going to pan out. So the dynamic like work environment, you're already doing that. You're probably doing it on a level that's not even going to be required in the medical device space. So that's first thing. Second thing is being able to perform at a high level under pressure. So in the critical care environment, lives are on the line. Medications are all lined up. They're running. You're programming everything. You're managing. You're a manager. You're managing a patient's life. That's not nothing, right? That's a big deal. And it's not just one patient, it's two. And, it might be three, depending on, if you're in Florida or California and the ratios, that kind of thing. But I would say the dynamic situation at work, the pressure that you're put under day in and day out for 12 hours. And the third thing is your communication skills, I would say, is a huge factor, because you're constantly communicating your assessments, your findings, reporting that to the people that need to hear it. And you're communicating with physicians on a high level, on a low level where it's just, more social, and on a high level where it's like lives are on the line. And so being able to communicate very clearly, concisely, and to multiple different people in the multidisciplinary team, that's huge. And it's all to better the patient's outcomes. And at the end of the day, in medical device sales, you're communicating with your multidisciplinary team in-house with the company you work for. And out in the field with the surgeons and the medical team that you're working with. And if you can have the patient in mind first, be that patient advocate, communicate clearly, then ultimately you're already doing the job.
Yeah.
You just have to, it's a mindset really that you're kind of just pivoting into a different industry, and the workflow's very different.
Yeah. And one other thing is you all are doing sales, even though you don't think you're doing sales.
Yeah.
Because every day you're already talking to patients. You'll also be talking to doctors or surgeons and having those conversations. And many times you have to go to battle for certain things, which is selling.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. You might have an assessment and you pitch it to the doc or the resident and they don't listen to you, and then the patient's deteriorating, or they could have gotten better care that they didn't. And so you might circle back. And so it's like that repetitive, and you might have a roadblock, and then you have to maybe approach the physician in a different way. Maybe they're data driven, maybe they need to see it with their own eyes, So yeah, that's a huge selling point. You are selling a patient's assessment to the team.
Yeah.
So you kind of are selling.
You're 100% selling, because this is what people don't think about, right? Nurses have such a great background because they're a wealth of knowledge. And many times nurses think their background doesn't matter. They think it's just for nursing, right? But what many of them don't know is their background is extremely valuable. And many companies find it extremely valuable that they already know the products, that they've already used the products, but they also know how to talk to physicians, because exactly what you just said about, are they data driven? What's the background that they're looking at? That's exactly what you do in medical device sales. You have to know if the surgeon is worried about, hey, the time that they spend in OR, or how long a procedure is going to take, or the cost for it. Like, there's a lot of different places that you have to see. Do they want the research? You have to figure that out. And it's no different than what you all do as nurses. The one thing I've seen most commonly with nurses and clinicals is they all think their background is only specific to that. Nobody else would find it valuable. And then number two, what I've seen is, like you just said, they don't even see it as sales. And even though you are doing sales, you might not be able to put a quota to it. You might not be able to put a dollar amount to it, but you are doing sales every day. And that's what many people miss. And then lastly, what I always want to just put out there for everyone is also, many times clinicals think their background is only valuable to the companies, AKA their background is valuable to just nursing. And if they ever try to leave nursing, they threw away their 4-year degree, 2-year degree, all their background. And they think they just threw and wasted all of it away, compared to it's actually just stacking on top to make yourself a better candidate for future opportunities.
Oh yeah.
And so I always put that for nurses to start considering, because you do have a great background. You do have a great knowledge base. You have done sales. But what many people miss is, again, to be a nurse, we've learned as long as you have a heartbeat, a certification, and you can talk, you'll probably find a job, right? We hear that all the time. I didn't even have to interview, or I got 1 or 2 interviews and I had a job. Medical device sales is not that. It's a lot of interviews. Real quick, how many interviews did you do?
I did a total of 12 for the position that I got.
Yeah. And I say this because we've posted that and people have been like, oh, I would never do that many interviews. If that's what it takes, I don't want it. But I just want this to be said. You make way more now than you ever did as a nurse. You're making the least amount of money you're ever going to make. Would you say right now, after the 12 interviews, it was worth doing the extra 10 to get where you're at today?
100%. Yeah. I mean, the 12 interviews, was it, I went into it knowing that there's going to be many, many rounds, right? I mean, that's kind of like an industry standard. They're trying to weed people out. They have to make a decision that's best for the team, because if they onboard somebody, it's their pocketbook that's also going to get hurt too, and the company and the representation and everything in between. And so now that I'm on the other side of it, it makes sense that there's that many interviews. It would be more of a red flag if there wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, going through 12, it was challenging, but it was a marathon, not a sprint. And you just have to kind of take it for what it is.
Yeah.
And enjoy the process, because as soon as you get the offer and you get in, it's that's a rush, but it lasts for only a moment. Looking back, the most exciting time really was that unknown journey. That's 99% of it. So
yeah.
You have to enjoy that part.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what are we doing?
Well, it's fall in love with the journey because, like you said, even what I tell people is once you get the offer, you guys are all excited for 24, 48 hours. It's amazing. And then it doesn't really hit you yet. And then first week of training starts. And then I always make the joke, the hardest thing you'll ever do is break into medical device sales. And then the hardest thing you'll ever do is be in med device sales. It all changes, right? It's all relative. But like you said, is enjoying the journey and learning the skills. That's going to help you be successful inside of the industry. But to that point of what you're saying earlier with nurses and just being able to change your life, but it was 12 interviews. Many of them think, oh, now I have to do 12 interviews. And what you have to understand, everyone, is normally we see 3 to 5 to 7 is pretty common. 10 to 12 is pretty excessive. And I'll just be honest, John had the most we've ever seen. 12. I've never had anyone else do 12 interviews.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, I felt like it was a lot, but it was like, man, like I feel like it's coming. Like I felt like it was right around the corner. So, you can get in your own way.
Yeah. But let's make this clear for everyone listening too, is because you had to stay where you currently were. Right.
Yes.
And so many people miss this, right? We get a lot of individuals who reach out to us and they're like, well, do I have to relocate? Do I have to travel a lot? Can I do this if I have a family? And it's yes. It just depends on the company, the division, what you're looking. And I always say this, hey, if you need to stay in one location, it could take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Right. But also, let's make this clear, is John also had a family. And it wasn't, he could just take any job. We had to make sure it was the right fit for him and his family so he could actually see his kid. So we could actually provide what he needed to. And so that's what I just want everybody to hear. And then also from the 12 interview side of your company, they weren't ready at the moment. Some companies are ready to go and we've gotten people hired in 2 weeks. But we always say that's not the norm. Every company is different and it's just like sales. A no just means no today. It doesn't mean a no in 3 months. And so that's just one thing I want everybody to hear, because many nurses will hear that and then they get scared because they're like, I don't even know if I could do 10 interviews. What would I do? How would I prepare? But each one's different and each company's different and each division's different. And then, yes, you can make those jumps and you can change around whether you have family, don't have a family, you want to stay, you want to move. There's all that. But let's talk about now you're making that shift. You're going through the interview processes, right? What's the biggest hurdles you faced as being a nurse and the pushback you got for why you might be not the right candidate for them when they had someone who had sales experience, for example?
So throughout the entire interview process with this company and the other company I interviewed for, one of the common threads was, okay, yeah, you have a great clinical background. That's cool. But, and there's the but, it doesn't mean that you're prepared for the dynamic day-to-day that this position is going to be, right? And so that was the common thread. Are you really capable of this? Because as a nurse, you're in a unit, you're kind of dedicated to this one space. You have your 12 hours, you clock in, you clock out. And so they were trying to make sure that I had the mindset going into it that I was going to be able to have a very unstructured, daily schedule, because nurses, like I said, you clock in, you clock out. You're on that unit, everybody. When you're out in the field as a device rep, it's not that at all. You're constantly saying, hey, how's it going? Introducing yourself. Every day's different. The staff's always changing. The hospitals are like, how many accounts do you have? And so I would say that was the main objection that I personally received was, are you going to be able to wake up every day and not know where you're going to go and have to have conversations with people you don't know? Because you're used to the opposite of that. So my rebuttal, actually, me personally, I worked in a float pool. And so that's how I leveraged and handled that objection personally was, well, yeah, I might be a nurse and I might be in a unit, but I'm also in a float pool. So I'm credentialed at 4 hospitals in this health system. And so they're calling me at 4:30 in the morning or texting me at 4:30 in the morning, telling me where I need to report. It could be a unit I've been in. It could be a unit I haven't been in. And so I was kind of already doing what they're describing. And so it was, even though it was an objection, that's how I handled that objection, was like, well, no, I'm kind of already doing what you're describing, going to a different place every day, meeting new people every day. having to show up with the same energy and patient first mindset. And so that's how I handled that.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want everyone to hear is you're going to get objections. Those objections are just meant to be handled, right? Many
100%.
times nurses get told, oh, you don't have what it takes or whatever the objection is. And they're not used to fighting the objection or just reframing the objection so you can put your leverage of your background to show why you're the right fit, right? So I just want to put that out for nurses. If you hear that, that's just a test. You need to be able to overcome it. But one thing I also want to put is, let's say they're not afloat, right? They're not floating. It's the same thing because I laugh. Yeah, you might be going to the same floor. You don't have the same patients every day or every week or every month.
Or even the same family members that are associated with those patients. So yeah.
Exactly. So you're always dealing with new individuals, new humans, right? And that's the thing I think we always want to get across to nurses. In this industry, you can be proactive and it can make your life a lot easier. Many times as nurses, you already are proactive, but many times it's also reactive, right? You're reacting to what's going on with the patient. You're having to try to fix them. There's a problem that just came on. You have to think on your feet, right? And so I think there's such a power to that because one of the things I don't see nurses talk about enough is you've probably had some pretty traumatic or challenging experiences being a nurse. And my favorite is, well, are you sure you can work 10 to 12 hours and not know where you're going? And it's like, you've already been working 12 plus hour days for the last how many years, taking on extra shifts, and you've had family members come and yell. You've had people that are upset. You've had patients that aren't happy to see you. You've already dealt with problems and you've probably had some challenging times. You already have the experience that you can be able to talk to them. They just need to know that. Right. And I just want to put that out for nurses. That's why your background is so great, because again, going back to this is the whole job of a medical device sales interview is to try to weed you out, is to show that you're not a good fit for them. And you have to show that you're a fighter because it's the exact same thing with surgeons or doctors. Just because you tell them what you have doesn't mean they're going to take it or use it. They need to know why. And you have to continue to be persistent because again, a no today doesn't mean a no tomorrow. And so I just want everyone to hear that because that is such a good point for when we're trying to have people overcome. Many times with your background, you already have. And let's talk about, so you're going through the interview process. You're starting to get some of those objections, right? How are you able to handle them like you just did? That's an example. But how did you continuously go through the interview process with different companies, continue to network, and have yourself stand out to where they're excited about connecting with you?
One of the things that comes to mind immediately is we actually hopped on a call in kind of a rough patch that I was going through. And you're like, John, bud, there's a tone in your voice that you have right now that is not the John that I remember meeting on our consultation. And you really need to start bringing that back, because what I'm not hearing from you is the energy that you should be providing in these conversations. And if you're low energy in these conversations, then you're not going to move forward. This is going to be harder. And even if you have the best way to handle an objection, if you're not bringing that energy factor, these people aren't going to want to work with you. And so that's what comes to mind. And so I remember you telling me that. And that also brings me to a second point is there's a strategy behind this as well. You know, there's the alter ego, right? And kind of maybe putting on this alter ego to handle these moments that you might not be used to or comfortable with. You know, Clark Kent, Superman, Bruce Wayne, Batman, you know, it's one person, but they're different, right? How they handle things. And so kind of putting on that other hat when you're networking and interviewing is a huge X factor in delivering a message, because all the candidates could be saying the same thing, and very likely they probably are. It's just like slight deviations from the mean, right? And the tone in your voice, the energy that you bring into that moment, that could be it. It could be as simple as that.
Yeah, I just want this to be said as I remember that call very well. I remember exactly where I was. And I just want everyone to know is this is why it's so important to have other people on your side. Because what I've learned, even with all of the different coaching that I've gone through, I coach people every day, but a lot of times we think we're showing up differently than we actually are. And we're always going to usually give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. But what people don't understand is the energy is what makes the biggest difference.
100%.
And let's just put this out there because people will hear that and they'll be like, well, what does that actually mean, the energy? It's like if you go talk to a monotone person who doesn't seem very happy, you say, hey, how's life? And you're like, just getting by. My favorite is just living the dream. And I just want to put that out there for anyone who says that. Anyone I've ever met who says living the dream is never living the dream. So
Never.
I just want that to be out there. So maybe just change you saying living the dream. But I put that out there because people want to be around energy lifters. There's either energy givers or energy takers. And it's your responsibility to be an energy giver in every way. And what people miss the most is, like you say, we spend a lot of time on, again, a lot of mindset and changing how you guys think is also that alter ego, because you might be a nurse and you might be a little scared coming in here. And you might be a little scared going on some of these calls. But if they hear that you're scared, it's going to be a challenging time.
Yeah.
But if you can actually get yourself to be like, oh, this is how someone who's confident would show up. And then we talk about all the extra stuff we have you guys do to have yourself become that, then you can show up who you're supposed to be. And I just want this to be said. You did that. You changed it. How fast did you start seeing success after you made the change of you're going through a hard patch to then we have that talk?
Man, when we had that talk that day, you hopped on the phone with me. I think it's also important to state that you have to be willing to take feedback throughout this, because if you're not willing to take feedback, then you're going to miss opportunities. And I was able to take that feedback, that criticism, not personally, but as a critique, like, oh, he's kind of right. I'm bringing low energy right now. And so when I made that switch and I started bringing that energy, that tone of voice, the eye contact, the presence, you feel it. You feel different. And people feel it too on the other end of the conversation, the room, or if it's just one-on-one. And in my personal life and in my professional networking journey to get into medical device, just like that. I mean, it was that, that night I sat on that advice, but moving forward, everything's changed. I mean, like I said, in my personal life too, I'm attracting different, people and energy and conversations and moments. And in the networking journey, it almost fast tracked it. I mean, I literally went right after that. I went into an interview process, and then I've made it to the final interview. Ultimately didn't make it because of, they chose someone that's already in the industry. But again, are you able to take feedback or not? Took the feedback, kept all those doors open, sat on the bench for that position, as they say. And then I took 2 days to kind of sit on it, absorb the moment, and then got back right on it, put that alter ego back on, that energy, brought it back. And then I was in another interview process, and 12 interviews later, I brought the energy. I showed up prepared. That's another thing. Just the preparation piece. Like, let's not, skip past that. But that energy, that tone, that consistency, that changed everything. That might have been like the biggest piece for me personally.
Yeah, no. And why I asked you that is because it is one of the biggest pieces, because most people aren't coachable. And what people have to understand is you're coming into a new industry you don't know. That's like moving to Spain and saying, this is how we do it in Miami. It's not going to go over well, right? And that's what people miss, right? Is when you are coming here, anything in life, whenever I still have mentors, and the whole job of a mentor, a coach, is to give you feedback, to get you better, because they see the potential of you. But what many people do is, like you were saying earlier, is many people actually can't take feedback or coaching, or they look at it as criticism when it's just coaching. And then they take a personal attack compared to it has nothing to do personally. It's just, hey, if you make this change, you'll get a result. And you did that, right? But I say that because many times we have to have those conversations as we do the coaching, but someone might feel like we're attacking them, or we're getting a little too deep on, hey, this hurts, but it's like, you have to grow. And that's what people don't understand is the whole process in here. You're maturing, you're growing, because you're becoming a person who's going to make double plus the amount of money you're currently used to. You have to change.
Yeah, you can't be the same.
And you're also going to have to change because you're coming into a different industry with a different background. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So it's us preparing you. But I just put that out there for everyone, because many times it's interesting. Many people want to go into something brand new, but then tell them how they've done stuff in the past all the time. And that's the easiest and fastest way to know that you'll fail, that you won't have success, that it's going to delay you and take longer. Because the people we get hired the fastest are the people who are the most coachable, and they just do exactly what we say, right? And there's no ego involved for the fact of they're just wanting to learn. And that's what I can sit here and tell you, as we just interviewed someone who has been extremely successful on the financial side of medical device sales and growing businesses. All he talked about was he still gets coaching. He still has conversations. We actually go grab lunch and he's giving me coaching. Hey, are you open to feedback? And that's what people miss, is the most successful individuals are always open to feedback. Compared to what many people do is they feel like if they're getting feedback, it means that they're not enough, that they stink, that it's something more personal, when it's not. And I just want to put that out there for someone, because I learned that with basketball. High school, I had the most supportive coach. Went to college, they don't care if you do a good play, because you're actually expected to do the good play. That's why you're there on scholarship, right? They're paying you to do that. And so I just share that to people, is you have to start learning why people are on you. And for example, my coach got on me one day and I started having a little attitude, and he pulled me aside and he said, "You're lucky that I'm on you, because I see your potential and I see where you could go. And you can't take it personal." And he's like, "When you need to get worried is when I stop getting on you, because that means I gave up on you."
Right.
And I just share that. We're not that hardcore in our program where we're like, we're just giving up on you. But we do have to give feedback, because otherwise it's just going to prolong the experience.
Yeah. If you can just keep that in mind, not taking things personally, not being sensitive, just taking the advice for what it is, which is advice. All the coaches in this program, and even the other people that are in the program, it's super supportive. And just keep that in mind. That's how everyone else is, framing conversations. And if you lose that, then you're kind of missing the point.
Yeah. Well, I just want to put this out here, because we've helped a lot of people break in and make well over 6 figures. And the fastest way to know that you will struggle making 6 figures is being defensive. And I just want that to hit for everyone. The moment you're very defensive, it's almost a guarantee that you're not going to make a lot of money. Because think about from a hiring manager, if they hired you on their team, you don't know everything.
No.
And they're there to help you. And if you always want to tell them why and justify why you did something wrong, you're not going to be at that company for a long time.
No.
Because nobody wants to be with somebody who can't take feedback and who always has to justify themselves. Because again, justification just comes from ego and feeling like you have to always be right. And I'll just tell you, as a young guy in this industry to where I'm at today, I've continued to learn that lesson, is we don't know everything. But the one thing I will say is we have helped a lot of people break into medical device sales. We do know that. So we just say, hey, trust us, right?
Yeah, trust the process for sure.
Now you're going through the interview process. You're a nurse. What's your advice to other clinicals as they go through this interview process?
That's a good question. I would say being patient. Sitting down and actually thinking about your why you're doing this, super important. Out of all the interviews, that's another common thread. Everybody's always going to ask you why. So if you don't have a why, you're going to run into, you're going to be embarrassed, right? Because it seems like a simple question, but it's actually pretty profound. They're really seeing if you've even thought about it, right? And if you don't have a why, then why would they want to onboard you? Why do they want to give you any more time? And so I would say really sit back and think about who you are, what you want, forecast, and it doesn't take long to do this, but it does take moments of like silence. Go retreat to the room, go to the library, go to the beach or whatever, wherever you live, find a space, sit down, think about it, and be honest. And that's going to kind of reveal a lot of things. And then you can, things to pay attention to and things to not. And then that's where the coaching kind of comes into play.
Yeah. And I think something that's really important for everyone to understand is if you don't know your why would they hire you?
Yeah.
In that
it
moment,
doesn't make any sense.
yeah, they need to know that you're in it. One example we always give is our single mother. She's going to get hired in 14 days. She has a big why. You, single dad, we know your why. Not only because you love to help people, because just so we're clear, every clinical that we ever work with, nurse, any clinical background, you all love helping people. That's why you got into healthcare. But what's the other bigger reason, right? One of the questions I got asked as a personal trainer, well, you already help people, so why don't you just stay doing that? And they're going to challenge you. And so just understanding your why. And like you said, go sit around and think about it. Go take time to think where you're at. But I want everyone to think about this because, to give you an example, I was just talking to somebody that's going through an interview process. And I said, why should they choose you? And why do you want this job? And the response was, well, it's close to my house and I don't have anything else. And I had to have the conversation. I said, real quick, I want you to think about it. An employer, you're hiring. If somebody gave you that answer, would you hire them? And they were like, absolutely not. And I said, so I think we should look into it a little deeper, right? And I just want everyone to think about that real quick is the answers you're giving. If you heard it and you're responsible for paying someone, would that actually move the needle for you to push them onto another interview? Because many people will just talk, but they don't even think what other people might think of it. And the easiest way we always talk about this is especially like follow-ups. Many people will reach out to me and say, hey, how do I do a follow-up to someone I already talked to? And I'm like, okay, great, let's think about it. I've had people literally send me a message saying, hey, what's up? And just understand, if I didn't really create a big relationship with you and you just got that from a random person or maybe someone you talked to 6 weeks ago and you talked to them for 10 minutes, would you respond? Absolutely not. But then that's what people will send to other people. And it's like, what would make you want to respond? And if you just put the lens on from that side, it can help you go through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing to the why is when you're sitting on that question, it's really important to realize what the reason you're doing that is you're kind of accumulating proof that you are who you say you are. And that's very important when moving forward in your career and professionally. It's very important that you have proof that you are who you say you are. And when you're sitting down and thinking about your why, that's really what you're doing, is accumulating that proof. And if you don't have any, go get it.
Yeah. And when you say go get it, I hope everyone knows that just means put in the work.
Yeah.
Go build the confidence. Go be the person you keep saying who you are and show that. But let's talk about this real quick. You've made the jump. You're now in medical device sales. Was it worth it?
It was definitely worth it because for me, the path that I was on was not sustainable. It was not filling my cup. At the bedside, over time, you're giving. You're giving. And that's what you're there for. I know what I signed up for. We all, in the nursing field, we all know what we signed up for. It is to advocate and to provide the care so they can get better, right? But by doing so, you are giving. By nature, you are. And at some point, when the burnout sets in, because ultimately it will, that's just a sign that your cup, you're kind of running out of fuel. And I was reaching that point where I wasn't prepared to give anymore in that capacity. I was running low, and I needed to find a path where I could still be a giver and assist patients in getting better and help them in that way and advocate for them that way. But at the bedside, my cup was becoming less and less full, and I felt that slipping for me personally.
Yeah.
I'm sure other nurses know exactly what I'm talking about, but coming in, it becomes harder and harder, and you have less and less energy, and it really starts to bleed over into your personal life. And then now you're not being the best at home, or you're not being the best with your family, your friends, like those key relationships start to get impacted, right?
Yeah.
The relationship you have with yourself gets impacted. You start losing your identity. And I kind of started seeing that happen. And so to all that to be said is it was important that I found something that I was still able to help patients without that same personal burden that I was getting at the bedside. Because at the end of the day, you kind of highlighted it. I mean, if you have a certificate, if you have a license, insert nurse, you know? And I was also kind of just tired of not feeling, you know, the efforts that you're putting in is not what you're getting out of it.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a big part of making that transition and seeking this opportunity and this career path was what you put in, you get out. At the bedside, you can put in 1,000%, but you're not going to get that in return. And so there's this give and take that happens under the radar. And that was like the main thing for me.
Yeah. And how much has your life changed from when you were a nurse to now that you're in medical device sales?
When I come home at the end of the day, that cup, it's not empty anymore. It's still full. And now it's bleeding over. And it's impacting what I can and cannot do outside of my professional life. So my friendships, now I'm communicating with my friends more. I'm communicating with my family members more. I'm with my son more presently, you know, and him and I are, you know, we're bonded and we always have been, but it's like I can give him the best part of me now. Whereas before I was really having to find that to give it. Because I had already given it all at work and I didn't like that feeling anymore. And so not to doom and gloom nursing, but this path that I'm on now is the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
I'm able to go out there and deploy myself, my expertise, and build relationships and get devices in the right surgeon's hands and make an impact on patients' lives and still come home and still have the energy to fill my family's cup up. And so now my cup is bleeding over.
Yeah. And also let's just talk about this financially, right? Because I always want this to be said. Many times we talk about with nurses, if people talk about money, they're like, no, we shouldn't, it's all this. But
yeah, a lot of gatekeeping.
Yeah, gatekeeping. But it's what I want everyone to understand is we all don't work for free. Mm-hmm. Nobody listening to this works for free and they wouldn't work for free. And I just say is you have to find spaces that can change your life. For example, personal training wasn't going to be what was going to change my life financially compared to medical device sales. That was one of the things I would always say. If I'm in the top 10% of personal trainers, that's a different life if I'm in the top 10% of medical device sales. Mm. And so just understanding the avenues. But we also talked about there's perks that you got that most people don't understand. We talk about usually the packages by the time you get a car, they pay for your gas, they pay for your insurance. They also give you a lot of benefits. It can round up north of $10,000+ easily. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that just real quick of going from nursing, paying for everything to now also the benefits side and financially, just the change that you've had in your own life.
Yeah. So on the financial point, not only are you making more, like you just said, but your expenses are now being offset, right? I mean, they say you should only put 30% of your income into housing and, you know, they typically, you know, generically break down different percentages for different parts of your life. In medical device, these like big chunks of your income are now being subsidized by your employer. So not only are you making more, you're spending less of it out of your pocket to do your daily activities. And so this is, it's compounding already, like your income, just by the simple fact that they're now helping you with your, you know, your car and your gas and your insurance and this and that. And so it's so relieving because now you can do other things and pursue other things and you can just navigate life so differently.
Yeah. And we always want people to understand that because I always tell nurses, even if you had a job for 100K and you got into medical device sales at 100K, it's not a 1-to-1.
No.
It's way different. You're going to make way more in the medical device, and it offers way more than, even if you made less money in medical device sales than you took home as a nurse. That's number one, what they miss. But also one of the things we always share is some companies will give you a car. Some of them will give you a car stipend. They're very different. But for example, we've had people like myself, when I worked at my first company, Medtronic, they gave me a car. And so that allowed me to sell my current car, which then put more cash into my pocket. And then from there, I didn't have to do gas. I didn't have a car payment. I then took all of the money I was spending on that, and then that would go into my retirement.
Yeah.
And you just move that money to somewhere that's going to be more beneficial for you. And that's one of the biggest things that we work with our members on is like, hey, once you start making more, what do you do with it? Because most people, the money will go somewhere, right? But most people just put it on eating out more or whatever it is, compared to, like you're saying, is if you do the right things with it, you can actually have the same lifestyle, save more while you're making more. And that's what I love about this industry is you also can make a massive impact while setting yourself up financially. And the last thing I just want to put out there, because I've had this talk with many people, is most individuals that talk to us, they're like, well, I got to do this for 30 years. Most individuals aren't going to do the same thing for 10 years. If you just look at the averages and where people are at. And so I just share that as one thing I want to put out there for nurses is I always say, worst case scenario, you try it and you made more money and then you go back, right? For example, even if you did this, and you got into medical device sales, and let's say you made the same amount of quote unquote money, you would actually make more from what we just shared. You'd get more experiences. It would make you a better candidate. And then if you hated all of that, you still could go back and just real quick, you'd probably make more because you left your one hospital and you're going to a new one.
Yeah.
And you'd make more. And now you just have a better opportunity compared to, again, most people think of what if and they go, you're homeless. Most of the nurses I talk to, they think they pay money and they're homeless that day. They lost it. They have no money. They're going to be throwing away 4 years worth of degrees and all the money they spent compared to they're just adding on to it. And now what happens, because you'll be able to talk to this, all of my nurses who come in and now see the other side of the industry, you don't even have to stay where we're currently at, but you could still go use everything you're learning and you see the other sides of healthcare that you don't have to go back to nursing, but you can still leverage all of your background and still financially set up a life for you and your son in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because it really is that. I mean, if worst case scenario, you make the jump, you make the leap, you make the commitment, you break in. If you don't like it, which is not likely to happen.
Just so we're clear, I actually haven't had anyone who was a nurse get in, not like it, and go back to nursing. I have yet to have that happen.
Yeah, that's why I'm smiling right now because it's just hard for me to imagine that scenario. But whoever's listening to this, where you are right now, if that's your backup plan, like it's a solid backup plan. Like you're already at that point.
Yeah. Right now, real quick, I want everyone to hear this because this is the biggest thing. You're already at worst case scenario.
Yeah, this is your worst case scenario.
You're literally. Just so we're clear, because this is what we always have to like help people with mindset is they play all the what ifs. And then I always tell people reach out to us. No one ever gets on a call with us because they love their life.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever got on a call, said, I'm super fulfilled. I make the money I want. Everything's great. Because otherwise we would say, great, just go do that. They always get on and then complain about where they're at. Don't like where they're at. And then we always say, do you want to stay there or do you want to change it? And just so we're clear, everyone loves to stay in their own misery.
It's easier
to
stay on the path that you're currently on.
Exactly. Well, because also people love to suffer together, right? Well, if I'm going through the struggle, guess who else is going through the struggle? Other nurses, other people, and we can all have our struggles together, right? What happens if you start doing better? Well, now you might get pushed out of that group. But going back to what we just said is they all tell me what they don't like. And it's the equivalent of you get in a relationship and then you just bag your partner the whole time to then just stay with your partner. If that's what you want to do is go out and tell people how much you hate your partner.
Yeah.
And then go back to that partner, you're the one who looks like the silly goose.
100%.
And so I just want to put that out there for everyone is nobody ever thinks about it the way we just put it. But worst case scenario is you go in and then you go exactly back, AKA you're already living worst case scenario. So the only upside is you go try it.
Yeah.
And you learn. if you like it. And I would just tell you, if this is anything you're considering, you'd actually be better off from a mental standpoint to go try it and know in 3 months that you don't want to do it than wonder the next 12 months or 2 years or 3 years, what if?
Yeah, you never want to go through life and then the what ifs start piling on. I mean, just you read a biography, you listen to other podcasts, you have conversations, you see people at the end of their life or at the end of their careers. It's always the same feedback. The regret aspect, that is, right? It's always, well, I wish I spent more time with family. That's like probably the key one. And then I wish I did this. I wish I did that. And you're never going to know unless you try. And to your point, you're already at your worst case scenario, which is your fallback plan. And it's like not a bad fallback plan, but there's so much more out there for you. You are capable. You have to start surrounding yourself with people who think that way too, because really what it is you're very likely surrounded by people that don't want you to change because they don't want to change. And when you are in that phase where you're kind of pivoting your life in a big way, in this case, like nursing to medical device, you're going to start speaking differently. You're going to start thinking differently. And some of the people that you're around, you might not see eye to eye anymore. You might not be having those same conversations anymore. And that's okay.
I think people think we're supposed to have relationships for a whole life. And what people don't understand is sometimes relationships are for a reason, for a season.
Yeah, seasons.
Or for a lifetime.
Start thinking about life in seasons.
Yep.
I think that's a good point, because even going through my divorce, that was a season. It has a start and an end, and there's a phase in and a phase out. And that's okay.
Yep.
It's okay to go through those seasons.
Yep.
But come on the other side of it and enjoy the next season, because now it's here. And take advantage of it. When it's cold, it's cold. Stay inside. When it's hot, get out.
Yep.
And so you have to start thinking about life that way. Otherwise, you're going to waste time, and you're going to have regrets, and you're going to be that old person having those thoughts, and you don't want to be that in that situation.
One thing I just want everyone to know is every person I know that's continued to grow has lost relationships of people who didn't want to watch them grow. Mm-hmm. Because when you grow, it makes other people realize if they're not or if they are. And if people aren't happy for you going to the next level, people will show you their true colors. Mm-hmm. And I just put that out there because we see it all the time with nurses. We a lot of times say crabs in the buckets, because I always say nurses are literally the best ones. They could all do it. But I remember being in medical device sales in the OR, and nurses would have comments to say, and I'm like, you're literally the best person. I would tell them how to do it, and they would be like, oh, I don't want to. And so they would take shots at people, and then they would also complain about things. But when you gave them the pathway to change theirs, they didn't want to. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just sharing that to everyone, it is okay to make those changes.
Yeah.
And just in life, I'll just be honest. I don't talk to almost anyone from high school. Why? Because I'm not in a small town of 2,000 people drinking beer in the Midwest. It's not my life anymore. And a lot of times when we first start in life, you're friends with who you grow up because of proximity. Mm-hmm. Logistically.
Yep. Proximity is, don't undervalue your proximity, the people around you. It does make a difference.
It does. And so I just share that for people as you continue to grow, right? Mm-hmm. John making double the amount of money he's not going to be the same John. Mm-mm. Right? And John in this season of life isn't the same John in the past season of life.
Right.
And so that's what I just want people to hear. Now, how I want to end this podcast is if there's a nurse listening or there's a clinical background listening and they're like, John, what's your advice to me if I want to do medical device sales? If I want to make that jump or I'm thinking about it, what's your advice?
If I could just choose one or two things, it would be to maybe stop chasing things that you don't want. Sit in silence and let the thoughts cross your mind. There's golden nuggets in there and there's garbage in there, but let it shift or let it sift. I feel like a lot of us are kind of dialed in too much and plugged in too much. And I think if you unplug and just kind of listen to your inner dialogue or the feelings that kind of bubble up, don't underestimate that, because that's going to really help you make those key decisions. And it's not nothing. So that would be one takeaway, is just kind of really sit in silence and think about what you want in life, because you're not gonna find out what it truly is if you're just constantly on the go or chasing things that don't matter. It's okay to say no to invitations and nights out or whatever it is that you're involved in. So I would say it's okay to sit in silence and have a little a lonely chapter, if you will, so you can find out really what matters to you. A second thing would be, you are more capable of any opportunity in medical device industry than you think you are. You are already doing more and handling more and overcoming more at your current position at the bedside, with the chaos and the hectic nature of it and the feeling that you don't matter. That's hard to overcome, and you're already doing it every day you clock in and every day you clock out. If you can handle that, you're more than capable of joining a team of people that don't have a zero-sum mentality. They're always trying to feed, or the people in the medical device industry are always trying to help each other out, I've noticed. And so it all stacks on top of each other, and people are always gonna be very supportive in this industry, where you don't get that in nursing. And so if you can handle the day in and day out grind and the lack of support, if you will, just imagine how you're going to feel, or what you can accomplish for you and your family if you make the jump, if you make the leap into this industry, because you're going to be in an environment that is super positive and encouraging, and the relationships that you're able to build. I mean, it's unlike anything that you're ever going to get in nursing. And so I would say trust your instincts, sit on who you are, think about your why, and two, when you make the jump, you're really gonna make a big difference for those patients, still just in a different capacity.
Yeah. And John, I want you to know I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Seriously. It changed my life. And I remember the day I started. I remember the day I got the offer. And it's an amazing community. And I look forward to keeping in touch with everyone, and just continuing to grow as this. I'm just getting started. So
yeah,
it's exciting.
You're going to continue to grow and you're going to prosper in this industry. And I know that. And it's because you're coachable, you are hardworking, and you want to just truly help people. Mm-hmm. I just want you to know it has been a true honor watching you grow.
Thank you.
And watching you take yourself to the next level, and watching you, I learned so much through a hard season of your life, and how you showed up every day, and you didn't let that define you. And even though you went through that super challenging time, I'm sitting here in Miami with you today, as you've truly changed your whole entire life, and the future is only extremely bright. And I just want you to know I'm truly so proud of you, and I know without a doubt you will be so successful in this industry.
Thank you. Thank you. Seriously.
Yeah. I just want you to keep chasing it, and we're going to be here every step of the way.
Appreciate that.
All right. We'll see you guys on the next one.